There's an interesting rumour going around, and in the quiet corners, in the quiet corridors of the Vatican, gestures matter more than proclamations. On the 6th of February, Pope Francis, visibly frail and entering what would be the final months of his life, made a seemingly small decision. He extended the term of Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re as Dean of the College of Cardinals, a courtesy perhaps, but also perhaps a signal. Ray is 91 years old, too old to vote, too old to officiate at the conclave, and yet he stayed. And this act, subtle yet deliberate, may have been the closest any modern pope has come to anointing his successor. In papal politics, the dean of the college plays a pivotal role at the moment of a pope's death. He convenes the conclave. He offers spiritual guidance. He wields tremendous symbolic authority. But canon law stipulates if the dean is over 80, the role falls by default to the next most senior cardinal bishop, who is under the threshold, and that man is Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State. Now, Parolin is a moderate and career diplomat, calm, technocratic, and until recently a front-runner for the papacy. But he's also tainted by scandal. The Vatican's failed London property deal and his entanglement in the controversial Concordat with China. Still, by leaving Ray in place, Francis has ensured that Parolin, and not another, would lead the conclave. Ed Condon of The Pillar put it crisply. This move may be the Vatican equivalent of a wink. A dying pope managing his legacy, placing a quiet thumb on the scales of history. It's not an outright endorsement, but it is not nothing. And as we know from the conclave that elected Pope Paul VI in 1963, sometimes the strongest candidates are those whose names are whispered rather than shouted. Let's go back to that 1963 conclave. Cardinal Giovanni Montini, the Archbishop of Milan, entered the Sistine Chapel already widely regarded as the next pope. He was the odds-on favourite, both feared and admired. And reports, admittedly apocryphal, suggest that John XXIII gave signs that Montini should succeed him. The cardinals, in the end, needed only 6 ballots. Montini became Paul VI, a modernizer and a tragic Hamlet-like figure, as complex as any pontiff in modern memory. The only pope who arguably had been anointed before election. And that conclave, too, was not merely a contest of personalities, but of the Church's soul, between progressives, conservatives, and the indefinable centre. Today we find ourselves once more at a hinge in history. Of the 138 voting cardinals, only 60% were appointed by Francis, but that's no ideological monolith. Francis, ever the tactician, deliberately balanced his appointments, mixing progressives with conservatives, Latin Americans with Africans, reformers with traditionalists. The result, a conclave where no one truly knows each other. The global reach is wider than ever. Cardinals from 93 countries, but they rarely meet, and familiarity remains low. Now, Francis may have appointed the majority of cardinals in the conclave. It doesn't mean they know one another. And that matters, because conclaves are shaped not just by theology, but by name recognition. And in that context, Parolin begins with a considerable advantage. But so do a few others. Matteo Zuppi, the charismatic president of the Italian bishops, beloved by progressives and open to controversial reforms. Jose Tolentino de Mendoza is another, poetic, theological, inclusive. Others like Robert Prevost or Louis Antonio Tagle strike a balance between the spiritual and the social. Then come the conservatives, Gerard Müller, a sharp critic of Francis, Peter Edo of Hungary, Ambongo Besungu of Congo, who channels African concerns with global implications, who is not particularly positive about the LGBTQ+ community. Wim Elk of the Netherlands represents a coldly austere doctrinal rigidity. But if no candidate reaches 92 votes quickly, the number required for election, The conclave may search not for charisma, but for compromise. And Francis, it seems, didn't name a successor, but he did set the stage. And by confirming an elderly dean, he ensured the Secretary of State would lead. By stacking the college with ideological diversity, he guaranteed complexity, and by staying enigmatic to the end, he invited history to play its hand. What follows now is a conclave shaped by paradox, one where Francis's fingerprints are everywhere, and yet where the outcome is unknowable. As we learned in 1978 with the election of the little-known John Paul II, sometimes the man who walks in a cardinal walks out a pope, but not the one anyone expected. In the final analysis, the pope may not be chosen by those who shout loudest or wave doctrinal flags. He may be chosen by fatigue, by consensus, by the mystery of the moment. Or perhaps, as Paul VI once said, the smoke of Satan has entered the church. Not evil, perhaps, but confusion, exhaustion, and weariness of faction. So did Pope Francis try to anoint a successor? Not with oil, but perhaps with the smoke of war, the smoke of confusion, the white smoke of success.